Hey, I'm Rob. I'm a fourth year neurology resident. I've got boards coming up and let's start studying because I probably need to hit the books a little bit. So we're gonna do some practice questions from Now You Know Neuro. Let's see how many I can get right. We're just gonna start with 5. Okay, first question. 25-year-old woman presents with recurrent episodes of vertigo, ataxia, nausea lasting several hours. So recurrent episodes, so we're thinking kind of away from something like strokes. These episodes can be triggered by physical exertion or emotional stress. So I guess they want us to know that there's some kind of, trigger for these. Between ataxia is nystagmus, but otherwise has a non-focal neurologic exam and mutation which of the following genes is responsible. Okay, so this is one where we should have probably just skipped to the end right away because you don't really need to know the vignette. This is just asking us if we know which of these following genes are associated with like a vertigo or ataxia syndrome. So let's go through these genes and cross out. And looking at them, I have some thoughts. So I know right off the bat that SCN1A is associated with Dravet syndrome, which is an epilepsy syndrome and not ataxia or vertigo. So I'm crossing that one out. The KCNA1 I know is an ataxia syndrome. I don't remember which one. And then I assume that this CACNA1A is also an ataxia syndrome, and I'm guessing the question is wanting us to distinguish which ataxia. I'm just going based on the endings. It wants us to distinguish between which ataxia syndrome it is. I don't really remember what these two are. This is why I'm studying, because I don't, these genetic syndromes, I gotta lock these in. I'm gonna go with the one I know, EKCNA. Let's see. Oops. Let's check it. Okay, so it was the other one. Well, I was right. My clinical reasoning was correct. Episodic ataxia type 2. Okay, and then this was episodic ataxia type 1. Briefer episodes. So, okay, what it's wanting you to know in this question stem is that if the patient has these episodic episodes of vertigo and ataxia, but it lasts several hours, you need to know that it's EA2. And if it's seconds or I guess much briefer in minutes, you need to know it's EA1. And the two ones I didn't know, let's see, familial hemiplegic migraines type 2, and then paroxysmal kinesiogenic dyskinesia, brief episodes of involuntary movement triggered by sudden movement. Okay, so this is a type of movement disorder. So PRRT2 is a movement disorder. Okay, yeah, and so what I'm going to do at the end is I'm going to go through my Anki deck and kind of unsuspend cards related to this, just so I can lock these other things in, because it's also important, the ones yes, but then the wrong answer choices that you didn't know, also lock those in. All right, let's go to question 2. All right, not a good start. 0 for 1. Let's go to question 2. What anatomical structure is the most common location for Mycobacterium tuberculosis related CNS infection? Okay, this should be a layup. This one, there's no reasoning through this. You just got to know TB meningitis. And going through the answer choices, temporal lobe. If I think of something in the temporal lobe, I'm thinking of HSV, so I know it's not that. Basal ganglia. I don't really like strokes and calcification. I don't know of any kind of like infection or anything that really has a predilection for the basal ganglia. And the pituitary, again, that's like, an abscess or like Sheehan syndrome and all that stuff. I'm not thinking pituitary. Thalamus, I don't know, maybe like CJD or something, but this is TB meningitis, hands down. And if it's not, I'm stopping now. Yeah, okay. TB can affect any part of the CNS, but the meninges are most commonly, if you think of a CNS infection, of a TB CNS infection, the first thing that comes to mind has got to be TB meningitis. Fever, hydrocephalus, cranial neuropathies, temporal lobe, HSV, yes, thalamus, CJD. Okay, so you gotta know these associations. I don't know what the basal ganglia and the pituitary, I guess those were just like red herrings, or I don't know what they were trying to get at with the basal ganglia and the anterior pituitary. All right, let's go to question 3. Okay, 65-year-old male with a history of alcoholic cirrhosis presents to the emergency department with dark black coffee ground emesis. He's found to have a systolic blood pressure of 76/40 and is tachycardic to 120. So just reading that, you're thinking, okay, he's probably having a GI bleed somewhere. He's hypotensive. He's probably in shock. And which nerve is most responsible for carrying the afferent fibers from the carotid sinus baroreceptors that cause the reflex increase in heart rate seen in this patient? Okay, so this is another one where you probably should have just skipped to the end. I should have just skipped to the end because this vignette doesn't really matter at all. What this question is actually asking is that, one, do you know that there are two baroreceptors in the body, the carotid sinus and the aortic arch? And then two, do you know that each one of these has a different nerve that carries the afferent fibers to them? So this is really kind of just like a, what's the word I'm looking for? A first order knowledge question where you really just need to know what nerve carries the carotid sinus, what nerve carries the afferent fibers for the carotid sinus. So if you didn't know this, I can tell you right now, there's two that you can eliminate right away. 12, this is to the tongue, and 11, this is your spinal accessory muscles. Neither one of these do any kind of like afferent fiber type deal, baroreceptors. So 10 and 9, you can narrow this down to a 50-50 shot. And so I don't really have a good way of remembering this, but I just, think of X in aortic arch, like the aortic arch is the big one, and then X is like the big denomination. And so I think of the big guys going together, and so cranial nerve 10 I associate with the aortic arch, and then cranial nerve 9 I associate with the carotid sinus baroreceptors. So we're gonna lock this in, cranial nerve 9. All right, let's see what this has to say. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, the two main baroreceptors, the aortic arch, the carotid sinus. Yes, the nucleus tracts solitarius and the ventrolateral medulla via the aortic nerve of Sion, which combines with the vagus nerve. Okay. Information from the carotid sinus reaches the same nucleus via the glossopharyngeal. So like I said, this was just testing you. One, you know that there's two different baroreceptors, and then two, do you know that each baroreceptor has its own unique afferent fibers? And so this is, you just got another fact one you just got to know. But even if you don't know, like I said, you can narrow it down to a 50-50 shot. All right, let's go to question number 4. Oh, great. All right, EMG. Left tibialis anterior at rest. So this is one where you're just gonna have to know some EMG. All right, one more time. All right, so, I'm not an EMG expert. I'm not going into neurophys or neuromuscular. So for all the EMG people out there, don't come at me. But for an amateur EMGer, this looks like very repetitive. It sounds like a machine gun firing. I remember that's a key buzzword, machine gun firing. So I'm going to go with a machine gun firing, repetitive, regular. And so now just going to the answer choices, you're just going to have to figure out which one of those best fits. Okay, looking at the answer choices, I'm going to be real. I do not know the answer, but I know some that are definitely not correct. And so fasciculations are irregular, so I'm crossing that one out. That's definitely not a fasciculation. I can promise you that. The myokymia, I remember as that's like the marching soldiers. And, I don't even know how I associate it, but I was watching this video for the Toy Story Army soldiers, how the actors, they nailed their shoes to wooden planks so they would learn how to walk. And I don't know how that makes me remember myokymia, but it makes me remember myokymia. So the marching soldiers for myokymia, so I'm crossing that one out. And then myotonic discharges, I honestly can't remember. Complex repetitive discharges and fibrillations. I'm gonna go complex repetitive just because I'm going repetitive, but I'm honestly not very sure. We'll see. All right, better be lucky than smart. Complex repetitive discharges, stereotype burst electrical activity, single muscle fiber, irregular recurring discharges, distinctive machine gun. Okay, machine gun, complex repetitive discharges. Gotta lock that in. Complex repetitive discharges, machine gun. I'm gonna lock that Anki card. Myokymia, marching soldiers. What I tell you, myokymia, marching soldiers. Now you'll never forget it. Think of Toy Story. And then myotonic discharges, dive bomber or motorcycle. We're gonna have to remember that. Myotonic motorcycle. They both have the MOs in it, and then dive bomber. I'll have to think of something for that. Fibrillations, brief positive, yeah. And then fasciculations, irregular, yeah, I knew that. Okay. All right, gotta lock in some EMG stuff. All right, Gaucher's disease is caused by a homozygous mutation in the GBA gene, which encodes the enzyme beta glucocerebrosidase. Yeah, don't come at me for saying that. Which of the following neurologic disorders is also linked to mutations, both homozygous and heterozygous, in the GBA gene? Okay, so this one, honestly, I don't know, but I for sure, looking at some of these, know they are not the right answer. Okay, so starting down the list, Huntington's disease, I know is a trinucleotide repeat, so I'm crossing that out. Boom, done. Alzheimer's disease, I know is the APOE and then trisomy 21, and there's some others, but I don't think it's GBA, so I'm crossing that out because it's definitely not APOE and it's definitely not trisomy 21. MSA is SCNAQ, or is there like a Q in there maybe? But it's definitely not GBA, I'll tell you that. It's definitely not GBA, so I'm crossing that out. I know it's like an S and an N and a C and an A. It's either a QA or CA, but definitely not GBA, I'll tell you that. Parkinson's disease, I honestly don't know any of these, so I'm going to hold off on that. And I know it's for sure not spinal muscular atrophy because, again, I think this one has like an S in it. It's like maybe even SMA again, so I'm going Parkinson's disease on this one. All right, let's look at these. SMN. Okay, so for spinal muscular atrophy, SMN, not SMA. Well, that's what it's called, SMA, but the gene is SMN. The multi-system atrophy is the SNCA. Okay, and then the COQ. I know there was a Q in there somewhere. Alzheimer's, trisomy 21, APOE4, and then the PSENs. I need to lock those in. And then Huntington's, HTT, trinucleotide repeat. So yeah, again, and then another strong gene association is LRKK2. Yeah. So this is another one. You gotta lock this in that Parkinson's disease is associated with GBA trinucleotide repeats. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully I learned something. I definitely did. Gotta go lock it in with my Anki cards now. But follow for more. Subscribe.